Sure. My name is Andrew Szegedy-Maszak. I am professor of classical studies at Wesleyan University, and my job is teaching and research and university service. All of these things are important at a school like Wesleyan. Um, my area of specialization is mainly Greek and Greek history. But for the past many years, it has also been something a little bit that you might think of as off the beaten track, which is that I work on the history of photography and specifically photographs of Athens and Rome or other classical sites in the 19th century. I think about them as cultural documents. Um, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I still find it fascinating and engaging and rewarding. Uh, the teaching, my teaching ranges from very small classes, say in advanced Greek, to larger classes like Greek history, a big sort of a more expansive introductory lecture. And then sometimes, although this year we couldn't do it, talking to groups of high school students like you all in the high school humanities program. And I have to say, I really miss it. I wish we could. I wish we could do it this year because part of my job, or part of what I see as my responsibility, is to take what I study and what I have learned about and make it accessible to a much broader audience. Um, I'm not just talking to my fellow scholars or to graduate students or to majors, even in my department. One of the things that I love about what I do is that I get to think about material that's really interesting and try to think about it at least in new ways. Uh, you could think that there's nothing more settled or, yeah, let's be blunt, boring than ancient Greece and Rome. But in fact, nothing could be farther from the truth. If you take your subject seriously, you keep finding new things in it. People have been reading these works of literature and history, been looking at these works of art, have been thinking about this philosophy for hundreds, well, actually thousands of years. It's hard to believe. And you might think that there's nothing new that can be thought about them or said about them, but that couldn't be farther from the truth, as I said a moment ago. We keep rethinking them. And that to me is part of the great pleasure of what I do. Does that make sense to you all?
Yeah. The next question is, what did you do for your education leading up to this job?
Ah, it's a great question. It started, believe it or not, in high school. I went to a small, all boys Catholic monastery school in Washington, D.C., called St. Anselm's. And there we had a very old fashioned education, which suited me perfectly. There were a lot of languages, there was a lot of history, there was a lot of writing. At St. Anselm's, I had 6 years of Latin and 4 years of Greek, which is, it almost never happens anymore. I mean, it's like something out of the bygone ages. But I really fell in love with it. And I found that I was okay, pretty good at it. And so I went to the University of Michigan and majored in classical studies. Um, then went to Princeton and got my doctorate in the same, and then was lucky enough to land a job at Wesleyan, where I've been for, as I say, for a very long time. One of the things that I want to tell you and tell the folks who might be looking at this after the fact is that with real sort of regret, I have to say that the kind of job I have is probably not going to be around very much anymore. That is, to pursue a subject as an undergraduate and then as a graduate student, and then get a job at a wonderful university where you can stay for a long time. This isn't the way things are going. More and more university positions are being filled by part-timers, adjuncts, what's called contingent faculty. Uh, I have to acknowledge the reality of this. At the same time, I really regret the reality of it. But I also want to say that any of you all who are thinking of a career in teaching should go for it. Think about the teachers in your lives who have made a difference. Think about what it was like when something that you were reading or talking about or studying, or a problem that you solved, or a problem set that you had to do, just suddenly changed things around for you. You can do that for other people. And to me, I'm sorry, this is sounding, I'm afraid, slightly preachy, but I really do want to encourage folks to think about a career in education. There are a few things that are more rewarding. Now, let's be blunt. It's not rewarding in the way that being a Wall Street trader is rewarding, but you want to do that? Okay, thank you. I see some head shaking. Nah, good. But what you do is you have an effect that is really beyond what you might imagine it would be. And that is deeply rewarding. Also, you get to think about interesting things and talk about them with interesting people, and it keeps being new. The old sort of caricature of a teacher who hauls out their yellowed, crumbling notes from 100 years ago and just kind of mumbles through them. I don't know anybody who does that. It's not worth it. Life's too short. There is so much more from actually learning new things about what you've known about for a very long time. I'm going to pause here for a second because I know that you have some questions that you want to get through, but I want to really hammer on this one point, that is that teaching and scholarship give you a way to keep renewing how you think about things. And again, I'm going to ask my usual question, which I'm not asking just to be rote, but does this make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay, the next question is, what do you do on like a day-to-day basis as a professor?
Oh, it's a great question. Um, I'm getting ready for a new term under the COVID uh, restrictions. Like you, I too have been mainly online for the better part of a year. And that has made me rethink how I present the material for my courses. So, um, starting week after next, we start our new term at Wesleyan. I'm going to be teaching 2 courses, and what I've been doing is to go over the syllabus and make sure that I can present it, or that I can make it work, or that we can make it work, because this really is a collaborative effort. That's one of the things that I think in high school, you don't think of it this way. You don't think of your being in a class as being a sort of exchange, between you and your teachers. You think the teacher is here, you're down here, and they're kind of putting stuff on you that you have to learn and take tests in and stuff like that. To some degree, that's true. But at a college, that is not true anymore. It is much more interactive. And so, what I've been trying to do is to go over, and I really mean from one day to another of class, what we're going to be doing, what I would like us to think about and talk about during that hour and 20 minutes or however long we have. How can I get people more and more drawn into it so that once we get going, can I be blunt? My idea of a great class is where I say nothing. And I, or at least at the beginning, just sort of hand out a topic and then just direct traffic. Okay, I say, okay, Anna, and then Sam. Sam, what do you think about what Anna said? Anna, what do you think about Sam? You know, and just uh, let the students and trust the students to do the intellectual work, because that's how you grow. It's like, you know, it's like any kind of workout.
Okay, so
So I've been rereading all the material for my classes, even though I know, I mean, this is not stuff that I don't know after all, but I want to be able to convey to my students the fact that it still means something. It's not just cut, dried, boring.
the next question is, what is your favorite part of your job and what is your least favorite part of your job?
That's easy. My favorite part of my job is my interaction with my students, both in class and out of class. That is, when we're talking about things in the context of the class setting, that's great. What I hate most, grading. I think if you'll ask any teacher, no matter at what stage they are in their career or what level they're teaching, you're likely to find the thing they hate most is grading. It's tedious. It's in some ways, I don't know quite how to put this. I know that there are different people have different levels of accomplishment, but to say, okay, you get an A, but you get a B plus. Um, I hate it. It's the thing I hate most. Uh, I sometimes tell the story. I had a wonderful teacher in high school who was an incredibly hard grader, but he couldn't bear to hurt anybody's feelings. And so he famously handed back a paper to a student in class and said, "Good, excellent, D minus." So good, excellent, D minus became kind of a catchphrase. I think he hated grading too, although he was a fantastic teacher.
Okay, so the next question is, I mean, you kind of touched on this, but what drew you to your career and made you want to do this job?
Realizing, I think what drew me to the career was when I realized how important certain teachers had been for me. I thought, well, maybe I can, to use the cliche, pass it on, you know, um, and also it was just, in some ways it was completely self-indulgent because I loved this material. I love the stuff that I work on, and to be able to work on it, to be able to talk about it, to be able to write about it and present it to a new audience in some ways every semester, the hell, it's the best job on the planet.
The next question is, what's the most important qualities or skills needed for this job?
Great questions. These really are great questions, which means that I'm stalling for a second as I try to think of the answer. Concentration, that is the ability to focus on something, I think is very important. To learn it so that you don't feel that you're just treading water or faking it. Patience, knowing that even though you might know something, it doesn't mean that somebody else is going to pick it up immediately. And you have to be able to let people know that it's okay to take some time to pick it up. And then finally, a sense of humor, that, or a sense of perspective that allows you to recognize that what you're doing is important, but that everybody who you're talking to has a very different life of their own. And what you think is so important probably may not be that important to them. And that's okay, but you can still get them connected to it.
Okay, and then the last question is, just if there's anything else you would like to share with someone who's interested in this career.
Go for it. Don't worry about, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up a step. There's something that you may have heard of, which is called imposter syndrome, which is people who are fairly successful or even very successful at what they do may feel that they're there under false pretenses. Even those of us who have been doing something fairly successfully for some time, I don't know anybody who has ever quite shaken it, or anybody who really cares about what they're doing who has quite shaken it. Don't let that deter you. As we say around my household, it'll probably be okay.
Thank you very much for doing this interview with us.
Thank
It's
you.
been